Well, I believe we have Mark Seddon on the line. He joins us from Washington. Mark, in all of the statements that we heard, did you see any clear indication of a new policy, either towards Iraq or the Middle East?
Difficult to see. I mean, a lot of preconditions were talked about. Certainly a willingness to engage, if you like, if Syria and Iran, for instance, were prepared to do certain things to come on board. I mean, couldn't help but think that there was a slight difference in tone also between both the President and the Prime Minister. But, you know, listening to all of that, there didn't seem to be any sort of headline initiative, any new proposals that came out of their study of the Baker Commission report. What you did see, I think, was certainly the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, focusing much more on that report and talking about its significance. The President saying, yes, of course, I've read that, it's very important, but I've also asked the Pentagon to look at strategy too. I thought that certainly in the speeches, the President's speech began by paying credit to James Baker and his team and gave a fairly similar response to one that he's given before on these sorts of issues. Essentially, both Prime Minister Blair and President Bush seem to be saying the objectives remain the same, however we're prepared to explore different ways of achieving them. Certainly Prime Minister Blair, much stronger focus on Israel-Palestine, supported by President Bush too. Prime Minister Blair also saying that he'd be prepared to go to the Middle East to try and kickstart a new Middle East peace process.
Mark, the US President seemed to dodge several times the question of whether he would pull troops out by 2008 as recommended by the group's report, and also said that he didn't think the authors of that report would expect him to do everything that they recommended, but to look at everything that they recommended. What do you read into that?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to come, any American president or British Prime Minister or any political leader is going to come straight after receiving a major commission and say, well, we agree with absolutely everything and we're going to start working on it straight away. But I suspect people in the Middle East who are waiting for some sort of top-line initiative, something new, may be a little bit disappointed. Clearly, the Prime Minister prepared to engage with Syria and Iran if certain preconditions are met, and President Bush said the same, but it's difficult really to see an enormous amount of movement, frankly, and I think that's I think we're going to have to wait some time, actually, essentially, for them to sit down and they've read that Commission report, but then begin to take those bits of it they actually agree with and start instituting them.
All right, Mark Seddon live there from Washington. Thanks for that insight. Joining me now on the phone is Ibrahim Bahr al-Ulum. He's a former Iraqi oil minister. He's also currently a member of the Iraqi Future Alliance. Dr. Ulum, let's get your reaction to the statements we've just heard.
I think the statement both by the Prime Minister Tony Blair and President Bush clearly shown the strong support to Maliki government, and also they clearly shown their welcome to the recommendation of Baker-Hamilton report about the Iraq, and also they insist that they will pay close attention for the recommendation. They agreed also for the new approach, a new policy to solve the problem in Iraq. However, the conference focused on Iraq and wider Middle East conflict. No doubt that the Baker-Hamilton recommendations, the most important recommendation is to continue the reconciliation plan adopted by Prime Minister Maliki, and to continue it. And again, the second most important recommendation to have the dialogue with the neighboring countries, specifically Iran and Syria. I think the conference will open immediately if you
just to pick up on a point which the British Prime Minister mentioned there, and he said it's very important that the policies of the Al-Maliki government reflect a non-sectarian manner. Now, I guess the key question for many people is, can Al-Maliki, does he have the power to take on the militias?
I think the main point is what is happening in Iraq nowadays of political violence and terror a reflection of the international regional interest conference. That is the reason the Maliki Initiative yesterday in his press conference asking for two steps. A, calling for a conference for the Iraqi political parties for the middle of this month. And secondly, for the neighboring meeting countries will be very soon. Those two initiatives will go along with the initiative of the Baker-Hamilton report, and I think it will be a situation of Iraq, and it will partially solve the problem. It will take a little bit time, but definitely by supporting Maliki government to continue the reconciliation and national dialogue will help. And this initiative deserves full support from the Arab and the Islamic as well as international community. Also, Baghdad summit, it is a time for an active initiative for the urgent meeting for neighboring country to be held in Baghdad to discuss the security problem in Iraq and open a dialogue with the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, as well as Syria. Such initiative is important in order to reach for a mutual view about Iraq's stability.
But without direct talks between the United States and Iran, which is something that there seems to be a reluctance still on the part of President Bush to engage in, without Iran first meeting some of the conditions which he outlined. So failing that, would Iran have much of an incentive to perhaps do the US's bidding in calming things down in Iraq?
I think the press conference of President Talabani last week after his visit to Iran is positive, and he's hoping that Iran will help us to achieve the stability in the region and to help the Iraqi people. And I think the visit of the Foreign Minister of Walid al-Muallim 2 weeks back to Iraq, also it is a positive step, and also to have a direct talk with the Saudi Arabia, all together neighboring countries. I think if they get together and to discuss the stability issue, they will reach to the positive result, and I think it will benefit not only the Iraqi people, will benefit the stability of the region as a whole.
Okay, Iraq's former oil minister Ibrahim Bahr al-Ulum, thanks very much for joining us. Let's go now live to Al Jazeera's correspondent in Ramallah, Walid Batrawi. Walid, looking at some of the statements that came out of that conference, particularly to do with the Middle East peace process, an affirmation that there must be a Palestinian government that recognizes the principles of the quartet, and Prime Minister Blair calling for the release of Gilad Shalit. Was that any surprises there?
Well, as I have mentioned before the press conference, these are issues that are expected to be raised in such a meeting between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Of course, one thing that captured my attention is that there was no mention of the roadmap that is the mechanism for achieving the vision of the United States President Bush of the two-state solution. There was no mention of the roadmap at all. And the other issue here is that there is a consensus between the U.S. administration and the British administration on the need for a two-state solution and the need to remove all obstacles from the way of the two-state solution. Of course, both did not say it clearly that this obstacle is the Hamas government, but mentioning the national unity government that meets the conditions of the quartet, that, forming such a government would lead to a two-state solution. Mr. Blair said that clearly that both governments, the Palestinian and the Israeli, should be ready for a two-state solution, and the Palestinian government, current government, is not ready as it does not recognize the state of Israel.